Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. This is a product review video. I did something kind of unusual for me. I actually ordered a set of heads assembled. And these heads are the Brodix, I know it's backwards, but you gotta bear with me, Brodix IK 180s. And the reason why I ordered these assembled is, even though I'm a Brodix dealer, if I was to order them bare, they actually end up costing you more than if you order them bare with the valve train stuff. So if you're ordering them from either a dealer or anybody else, you're better off to order them assembled, because it's actually, in the long run, it's cheaper, because if you order them bare, they won't be valve jobbed. They won't have the guides honed. And I don't think, the valve spring pockets themselves cut for a smaller valve spring. I don't think it's CNC bolt blended either. And also always has a bigger chamber when you order them bare. But if you order them assembled, you can get them whatever chamber size you want. They already cut for that. The valve job's done, obviously. So it ends up being cheaper that way. And this is the only head of Brodix that's this way. Usually if you order them bare, they come valve jobbed. They already have the spring pockets cut for the larger valve springs and everything else. It's only this head that's that way. This is the 180. I'm going to end up porting it. So this one's going to be ported. It's going to end up having a 208 valve and end up being 195 when it's all said and done. But I thought I'd show you at least what it is out of the box. Now, I ordered it with the larger spring package with the 146. I won't even use these springs, to be honest with you, because these the customer wants a beehive springs. I'm going to use the Pack 1220X, so all of this is going away. Anyway, if you get them from Brodix, they'll have this spec sheet on it like this. Tells you the installed height, and also tells you the pressures, and also the max valve lift. As you can tell, this one says up for hydraulic roller with 135, and then 335 on the open. To be honest with you, that's really light for a hydraulic roller spring. But I guess if you're only doing a 575 lift, you're probably gonna be okay, as long as you don't turn a whole lot of RPMs. This head will be flowed. I'm gonna tear it apart and flow it. But this is what it looks like on the outside. It does come CNC bolt blended. Or not, it is CNC bolt blended, but it is CNC gasket matched to a 1205. Now, I have to say, there are other heads out here that are, this is American. They cast it in Mena, Arkansas, and it's all put together in Arkansas. It's not an overseas casting at all. So, because I like them to support American. A lot of other stuff you can't do it, but there's still American parts available, so I'd recommend it. But anyway, this one, being that it's 1205, it's a much smaller port, but the casting itself, I really like them. So it's a strong quality casting. So you can tell it's pretty beefy. And this is what their chambers look like. Now this was the 70cc version chamber. They have a smaller 64cc chamber that's common. But I didn't order that way because the customer wants the bigger chamber version. So that's where we're gonna end up. Even though I want to port it, still doing the bigger chamber version. But anyway, you can see very nice, very thick decks. You're like, wait a minute, there's no water passage here. Yeah, the IK heads don't do it through there. They still have their normal ones. So it's still plenty of water flow. They just, for this part, that's not. The other heads that there is, it is. Anyway, I'm gonna tear it apart so you can see what it looks like on the inside. You can see it's CNC bolt blend, but to me, for the budget heads, because these really are budget heads, they are probably the best quality budget head you can get. There are other budget heads that do make more power. I'm not gonna lie about that at all. For instance, I do think that profilers will make more power, but if you look at it quality wise, this is a much better casting. But anyway, let's take it apart and take a look. Quickly, here's another view, just so you can get the idea of what the bowl looks like on these 180s. You can tell it's got a vane here, which is really good. I like that they put this in. A lot of the Brodix heads don't have the vane. I think it helps as far as airflow wise and stuff. You can kind of, I know it's so dark because let me get a flashlight out. Being they're as cast, they don't really shine like it, ported ones. It kind of gives you an idea of the port. I will flow it, and I'll provide flow numbers here a little bit. There you go. Well, I may have spoken too soon. This is the other head. I vacuum tested the head, and only one didn't pass, and it was this one. And it was really close. It wasn't like it was way out to lunch. In other words, what I do is I put my thumb over the vacuum gauge to get the max it'll pull, and then ½ pound less is what I consider within tolerance. Because typically you can't anymore. In other words, if I put the vacuum pad directly on the head, it'll pull the same. because it'll leak past sometimes the pad of itself of the machine. Point being is a 1/2 pound. This one didn't do it. It was really close. And so I lapped it just to see. And the lapping actually came in. So I will say they're probably all sealed. Mostly what happened is by accident, something fell off while they were assembling the head and got in between here and the valve. So it just barely kept it from sealing up. So then when I took it off, it must have sealed itself. However, I don't like this. Okay, so I lapped both the intake and exhaust valve. And you'll have to bear with me as I try to explain this. If you do this for a living, you already know what I'm talking about. But these are the lap lines. Let me get my pointer here. These are the lap lines right here. And you see all this metal that's shininess below? Typically, we want the lap line down here. Now, on a street deal, I will leave a little bit, like a sliver of shiny down here, just because I know that through seat erosion, it's gonna sink in a little bit and the lap line will be all the way at the end of the valve. On race deals, we always have this lap line here all the way at the end. So there's not even a sliver, it's the end of the valve there. On stock deals, like I said, I'll leave just a sliver of aluminum through here, or silver, not aluminum, but shiny machine steel through, just because I know it's gonna sink in. This one is so high up, it's almost into the back cut. This is the intake side, it's the same way. So that's the lap line. Look how much metal there is between. It's almost like that's cut out for a 194 valve, and this is cut out for like a 155 valve job, because they're just really small. In other words, the valve job's cut for a smaller valve than I think it is, or they intentionally did this. And that may be the case, where they're like, well, these would be more for use for street, and because of street erosion, it might sink in. What I mean by that is, as the valve job wears out, the valve's gonna sink in, so that lap line that you see, man, I wish I had a better pointer handy. Hold on just a second. It's never where I put it. Anyway, as the valve job wears out, this lap line will sink down. So maybe that's what it's for, but I'm not used to seeing this much space in between. So I'm not really happy about that. Now you're like, well, what's that mean? Well, if you were to order these for me, if they passed, I never order them. Well, I did this time. If you ordered them through me, I would order them probably assembled, but then I'll take them apart, check the valve job, redo the valve job if needs be, and so on and so forth. That's just what I do before it goes out the door, because I don't want the customer to have problems. This head altogether is going to be changed anyway. So I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm so angry, because I'm going to end up cutting this out to a 208 intake valve anyway, and I'll redo the exhaust valve job just because I'm going to be porting this head. So it doesn't really matter how it came. The only reason why I even ordered it assembled, like I said before, is just because it was cheaper to get it that way. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and flow it, and you get to see the numbers. By the way, having a valve set up like this, it's going to flow worse. If it went all the way out, it would flow better. Okay, I'm going to flow it and share the numbers. Okay guys, so here's the Brodix IK 180. I've already floated at 28 inches. Now what I'm going to do, just because I'm curious, and I thought I'd share my curiosity with you guys, is I'm going to flow it at 45 inches. And if you watch some of my other videos, I've showed about flowing at a higher test depression when I was doing my headhunters. But I thought I'd show you this. So let me go over here and I'll show them to you. And I'm going to go through a little bit more information than I did before. So you see these lines here? These are what it was before at 28 inches. And if you can tell, it's corrected to 28 inches. And I actually floated at 28 inches. So if you see here, this is at, I think 500 lift. And then you can see the flow starts dropping back. What I'm curious to see on this is if I float at 45, if it will start dropping before that, because so many people give me a hard time about flowing at a higher test depression. They're like, why would you do that? Most people don't have a cam that's that big. That's ridiculous. And I tell you, because it has something to do with the stability of the port. Well, it's clearly backing up here. So I want to see if it's going to continue to back up. But here's what you can see. On this screen, right here, you're going to see the actual flow numbers. I'll flip it over. This is what it's actually flowing at 45 inches. This number should look probably pretty high, almost insanely high. Because remember, all of our flow numbers are corrected to 28 inches. This one will be uncorrected, and so it'll have a pretty high number. This one that you see here in the box that will be located right there will be corrected back to 28 inches. So the curiosity is to see if it flows less or more. Okay, so let me put on my ear protection. By the way, I'm only gonna go 4, 5, 6, and 700 lift. Okay, so let me throw on my ear protection. I'll do this real quick, hopefully. Okay, so I've turned it off. What you saw there was the uncorrected numbers, corrected numbers. This recorded the corrected numbers, by the way. So let me just pull up a report real quick and we'll take a quick peek. And yes, I can print this off, but I'll show you. Okay, there we go. So you see cylinder 1, that's the intake side. If you look at it, it flowed 220 at 4, 230 at 5, and then it starts dropping 229 at 6, 227 at 7. If I look when I flow at a higher test depression, it actually, even when it's correcting back to 28 inches, it's flowing more. But the question I was trying to see if it would drop off on flow earlier. And actually, it does it at the same point. See how it's 231.6. See, it still dropped 1 CFM just like it did there. But it still flowed more with higher differential pressure. Anyway, that just gives you something to think about. But let's talk about the flow numbers at 28 inches. So let me do a print off and we'll talk real quick. Okay, so here's the numbers. This is the ones at 45 inches of vacuum. So we'll just forget about those, but I do want to show you the difference. You just saw that anyway. These are the numbers that flowed at 28 inches. Now I had a radius entry, and this was actually, I didn't use clay on this one because I knew it was going to flow at 45, and I had my entry that I could use on this one because this Brodix IK 180 is a 1205 intake gasket. There. Now that's pretty small. Usually they're a 1206 for everything else. If you get the 200, it's a 1206. Just remember that. But anyway, because I had the entry for a 1206, I could really play around it and make it work so I could float at a higher depression. But anyway, so did that, no exhaust pipe. And this is on a 4030 bore. And as you could tell, it goes 220 at 4, 230, 228, 227. Now, some of you that have some experience with the flow numbers may be like, well, that's pretty close to a Vortex head. On my bench, the Vortex head's about 10 CFM less. So this is not that far off from it, no. And I really think it has to do with the valve job that I showed you. If they had taken it out further to the end of the valve, it will flow more. But they didn't, so they made a mistake. Well, we'll see. I've got another set on order that are just like this, but it's these are 70 cc chambers too, so maybe that had a part of it. I've got a set coming that's 64 cc chambers. When they come, I will redo the test to see if it's different from head to head. And we'll see how it does. And before some of you think, well, this head's just an absolute, it's just not very good. I'm going to tell you a couple stories with this. I have ported a set, which is like, I know, well, that changes things. It went from 230 and it flowed 290 when done. The exhaust went up like 200 CFM. It went on, and this is going to go against every LS guy. It went on a stock 350 short block, so stock powdered metal rods. And the guy put twin turbos on it, and it made 1100 horsepower on the engine dyno. I'm not making that up. So from people think LSs are just a king, small block Chevys do it too. That's a stock block. That's 1100 horsepower with these ported. And by the way, I was with a flat tappet camshaft. So pretty impressive for what it was. So you can't really knock the head when it has the potential to make that much power. So that's just one scenario. I've had others too that have gone pretty good. I had another one that made 530 to the wheels with a set of these ported. I know you're like, well, that's ported compared to as cast. That's true. But really what this head is marketed to is for you budget guys that are just trying to get away from your Vortec heads. Because as cool as Vortec heads are, they crack. Okay, I'm just going to flat out tell you. And they don't have screw-in studs unless you do all this stuff from them. So this is a nice upgrade from your factory cast iron heads. That's the idea for these heads. Now, I will say this, and I haven't brought it up. Brodix is made in America in Mena, Arkansas. It's a family-owned company. It's probably one of the only companies left that's like a family-run. The only one I'm not so for sure, and in America. The only one that might be that way would be Profiler, but I think Profiler does other stuff besides just cylinder heads, at least the company, their parent company. Most of the cylinder head companies have now been bought out by a corporation, or I don't know what they call them anyway, but investment hedge fund type of deal has bought them, with the exception of Brodix and I think Profiler and TrickFlow. Although I think TrickFlow is owned by Summit. But anyway, I really like the people at Brodix, and that's where I really like their product. It's American made. You can visit their foundry. Well, you can't visit their foundry, even though it's in Mena, Arkansas. They don't let you tour for that. Obvious, it's probably pretty dangerous. But you could tour their factory there, where they actually put the seats in, do the valve jobs, deck the heads, everything else there. You can CNC port the heads as well. They're really nice people, and I really enjoy their products. But I'm gonna go ahead and tell you this too. And this is gonna be a little bit longer piece of this puzzle, but I'd say probably in 2007, so quite a while ago, I'd gotten an email from somebody in China, and it said, I'm selling these heads. Would you be interested in buying them? And what the person was they were a wholesaler in China. They were casting heads, and they were selling them to anybody who would buy them in the United States. So I was like, well, I'm curious what they are. And they said small block Chevy. When I click on the picture is this head to a T. And this was like 2007, maybe 2008. Doesn't really matter. Years ago. I was like, son of a gun. That's the Brodix IK head. And some Chinese companies trying to sell me them. And when I mean sell them, it's not individuals. They were selling me pallets of them. So I actually wrote Jeff Brotherton. He's one of the family members that owns Brodix. I think his dad started it and he owns it. And I emailed him, I sent him the email. I'm like, look at this. And he said, sadly, there's nothing I can do. I know that they've probably taken my design, but there's really no recourse that we have for this because well, just the way the American system works. You can try to sue and hopefully someone won't copy your stuff, but they do. And I really felt bad for them. I truly did, because think about their perspective. You've got the time they spent to invest in making this, and someone just take the head and steal the design. Now, there are imitations of dart heads, and maybe this is me, and it's probably the wrong way to think, but the corporation now owns Dart. And so the Chinese company taking it's not the same effect as in a family-owned business to me. And I know I'm probably wrong in my thinking on that. But anyway, so I felt really bad for him. And the company that was selling those heads finally found someone who would buy their heads, those knockoff of these heads. And I don't know the whole scenario with it, and it makes it such a weird situation overall. But the head that's the Chinese version of this head is from Promax. I'm not saying Promax copied them. I'm sure what happened was, if you know anything, and by the way, the guys at Promax are super nice. And I don't want you to think anything wrong with them, because in a way, I mean, they bought Patriot Performance. Patriot Performance was selling Chinese heads. And that's just what they were. They bought those. Well, Patriot probably had a deal already in place to buy the knockoffs of them. So they end up getting into it, and they've been selling them. And I'm not going to lie, I really am curious, and if Jason or any of the other people at Promax Performance wants to send me a set of their heads that are just like these, I'll be happy to compare them. But I'll give an honest statement either way. But both companies, Promax is in America, they're in Alabama, and Brodix is an American company in Mena, Arkansas. Both of them are really great companies. Both are run by great people. So what do you do as a consumer? Both are selling pretty much the same head. Now, I can't say 100% either, because I still haven't seen one besides the outside appearance, and it looks identical. For all I know, they made one little change, because someone could say the same thing about the Dart head. The Dart imitation head that the Chinese make has one little change, but everything else is the same. Anyway, I thought I'd give you that little piece of knowledge. And please do not think Promax stole their design. This was before Promax even existed. Someone had stole it. So I shouldn't say stole it, copied it. And I'm just giving you some of my opinions. These could be wrong. I don't know entirely 100% sure. I just know what's come across mine. I'm sharing my experience. So, two great companies. And there you go. It's probably more information you even care to hear. But I still haven't seen the Promax one, so if anybody wants to send one in, feel free. However, I will not sell the Promax small block Chevy one. I will port it if you send it in, but I will not sell it just because Brodix has been so good to me for such a long time. I mean, they gave me a chance when other companies didn't, and I appreciate them for that. So I won't sell the Promax small block Chevy head. I will their big block because it is not a copy of anything from Brodix, but I'll port anything. But anyway, there is a little bit more information for you. Thanks for sticking through the end of this video. If you have questions or comments or anything, feel free to leave them in there and I'll try my best to respond. If anybody in any cylinder head company wants me to look at their head, I'll be happy to do a little review real quick. Anyway, you guys take care.